Wonderland Ceramics in Hackney. And look who we found outside, the leader of the Greens, Natalie Bennett, and her on-screen husband and leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage. Welcome to you both. Now, Mr. Obama's just landed in London. He's got an article in the Telegraph coming up in the morning. Towards the end, it's pretty strong. It's in America's interest, it's in Britain's interest, in the EU's interest that we stay in the EU. Is he right to intervene?
I don't think he is, no, but I'm also not sure, does he really understand it? I mean, I was in Washington last year, meeting senators who thought the EU was a bit like NAFTA, and just like kind of a friendly trade club. That's a generous interpretation. A less generous one is that it's in his interests and the interests of big, giant American corporate businesses that Britain stays part of the EU, that we move on to the TTIP, Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership Treaty. I guess it's the latter.
Is he right to intervene?
I think it's right for him to share his views. He's the leader of the US. He's sharing the US view. I think we should look at it with appropriate scepticism. Of course, he's first of all looking at the view from the US. But I think he's also looking at the words we've heard thus far show very much that he's saying that the EU is greater than the sum of its parts in terms of its role on the world stage. And that's the fact that, you know, when you put together a group of nations who are working to tackle things like climate change, who are working to protect workers' rights, when you put them together and work as a group, that is actually stronger and more effective on a global stage than if each one is working alone, or if indeed we have an EU without UK membership.
Will it make a difference in the intervention of the President?
I don't think it'll make any great difference at all. I mean, frankly...
when have you ever taken notice of what a US President said?
Well, I mean, I've always followed what they said. I mean,
that's
how
a
they
different
needed
matter.
to intervene in Vietnam. At least he's not bombing us. He's just telling us what he thinks. That's a real improvement with American diplomacy.
But you don't think it'll affect the debate very much?
I don't think it will affect the debate at all. People will make up their own mind based on the debates we're seeing with that Nigel's lot and the other side are banging on about. I've said all the way through, I'll vote to leave the moment someone can prove to me we'll be better off outside. And the overwhelming majority of economists and business people are in favour of staying in. It's a nightmare.
You're following big business.
It's a horrendous bureaucty.
Corporate can.
And you need to reform it. But I think...
The bankers are in favour.
Well, no, yes. But just look at the last 60 years. One, we were outside.
I want to come back to the President. No. That's the discussion. I want to ask him, will the President's intervention make a difference?
I don't believe it will. I wish I could take Obama just for an hour to a European Union meeting so you could understand to what extent the European Union is driven by anti-Americanism. It's all about supplanting NATO, it's all about having, you know, kind of pastiche European defence identity. The whole French idea is about elbowing the Americans out of Europe. I mean, the Americans misunderstand the whole thing so badly.
But I think what we're being presented with an idea is really a parody of what the US is like. You know, Obama is not necessarily listening to those senators. Obama is listening to his advisors, to a wide range of experts. Just as, of course, the British people are listening to the scientists for the EU. Scientists are overwhelmingly coming out in favour of the EU. Tonight there was a big meeting, environmentalists for the EU. There's large numbers of groups of people. And in terms of big business, the EU is an organisation that can stand up to and rein in big corporate interests in a way that's difficult, very, very difficult or impossible for an individual country to do so.
Nazim, I voted Green in '89 because you were the only Eurosceptic party in this country. I thought highly principled. Is it just the money that's turned the Green Party in favour? I mean, clearly you're funded heavily from the European Union. Your European election campaign was funded by the EU. Is it as simple as that? Well,
I think I'd very much invite anybody out there to have a look at our accounts for the European campaign or any other election campaign, and they'll find that the level of funding that we have in the Green Party is on a very much smaller scale than other parties.
Did you get any?
Did you
get any money from the European Union?
Not to fight an election campaign, of course not.
Well, you get money from the European
part of the
Union.
European Green Party.
Well, of course, our MEPs were doing all sorts of work.
The Treasury document, the big development before the President arrived was this Treasury document, the forecast to 2030. Was it propaganda or public information?
I think it's a guess. I mean, the simple fact is, as you were saying at the beginning, we can't predict what's happening to the British economy next year.
Actually, we can predict what happened last year sometime.
I know. There's one simple fact. We should look at the last 60 years of our exports to Germany. In The years before we joined the EU, they were cut in half. In the years since we joined, they've gone up by 120%. And now that's quite telling. Those are facts. When we were out, we lost a load of our export market in Germany and the rest of Europe. Once we joined, we got it back.
When we joined the EU, we lost all our trade with outside the EU because we put tariffs on.
We cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. Hardly surprising that our trade with Germany increased. But remember, their trade with us increased much more quickly than our trade with them.
And that's because we don't invest enough in the way they invest in their industry.
No, look, the point is this. The Chancellor is basically saying, and everyone's saying, we've got this wonderful deal with the European Union. Without it, we'd risk everything. I think the way we should look at this is we've got a rotten deal with the European Union. For access to selling our goods tariff-free to their markets, we are paying about 1% of our GDP every single day as a membership fee. For an economy, 12% of which is exports to the European Union, 100% of our businesses are regulated, and we have total free movement for 500 million people. It's one of the worst trade deals anywhere in the world.
Natalie Bennett, what did you make of the Treasury document?
Well, I think it really does reflect, in many ways, the debate at the moment has been very shallow and very focused on figures produced by both sides.
You think the document was shallow?
Yes, I think we all know how George Osborne suddenly entirely changed his tone from.
Have you read the document?
I haven't read the detail of it. I've read the reports like everybody else has.
How do you know it's shallow? I mean, I have. It's actually. I mean, there are many criticisms of it. Shallow is the least. Well, it's packed with quadratic equations.
Well, I think if you think shallow is how is this based on the reality of the world?
Yes.
And in that case, given the fact we had George Osborne, who was, in autumn, suddenly discovered all these many millions of pounds down the back of the sofa, and then he found out he didn't have them. But the problem is, what we need to do is have this debate on a much more serious grounds about what sort of country Britain is, how we relate to our neighbours, and that means things like air pollution, water pollution, wildlife, all of those things. They don't stop at national borders.
Newts.
They're all related to each other.
Michael?
And it's really important.
Well, if it is such a cataclysm to leave the European Union, how is it that the Prime Minister a few months ago was saying that he might, if the negotiation didn't go right, recommend that we leave the European Union?
You didn't believe that.
No, but I'm just saying, from the point of view of consistency, if it is such a cataclysm to leave the European Union, why has this government risked having a referendum so that we may leave the European Union?
Because they were frightened Nigel was going to take a lot of their votes.
The government...
That's probably true.
Yeah.
The government is either being insincere or it has been irresponsible, or indeed possibly both.
Makes me wonder, how does the rest of the world survive outside the EU? It's remarkable, isn't it, really? Given these wonderful benefits that seem to accrue.
I've just returned from Switzerland, which appears to be doing rather well.
And has more free trade deals across the world than we do, negotiating on its own behalf.
Before we get to the referendum, we've got the May the 5th elections, and both your parties are involved in that. Is the referendum playing into UKIP's position or status or
it's not doing any
possibilities?
harm. It's not doing any harm, that's for certain. And I'm pretty confident that UKIP's going to win seats in the Scottish Parliament, the Northern Irish Assembly, the Welsh Assembly, and in London. So it's not doing us any harm. Yeah.
What about the Greens?
Well, I think many people are seeing us as the anti-UKIP, and that's very much to our benefit. It's something, if I go back to the Rochester and Strood by-election before the general election, that was when I first heard that. And the fact that we're very much on opposite sides in this referendum, and we're celebrating the free movement of people in the EU, the fact that enriches the possibility of all of our lives, us up against UKIP, that's...
You like that?
Yes.
Now, it's very late, so you can be honest with us in this. Nobody's watching.
No one's watching.
Is it true that after the referendum you're going to kind of rebrand and relaunch your party?
You know, when I was in business, I worked for a small firm, and it was a very happy little place, and it was taken over by a bigger company. It became different, and the whole modus operandi had to change. And UKIP is basically run by volunteers who volunteer to be elected onto an NEC, and they run the party. They choose the candidates, they do the discipline, and that was fine when we were a sort of 2%
But you think that
party.
has to change?
We now have to have a professional management board, and I think the model where we send money, get a membership card that we hold in our wallets, is just old hat. You know, what Casaleggio and Grillo have proved with the five-star movement
Is it in Italy?
is a completely different approach to politics, and I think that's where UKIP needs to go.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, Natalie Bennett, and you could answer it in one word, and the one word could be yes, or no, or maybe. Are you going to stand for re-election as leader of the Greens?
I am entirely focused on the
No,
elections.
you only got one of 3 words. It's
Well,
either yes, no, or maybe.
And I am going to say that I will think about that after the elections, which are what the people of Britain, the people out there listening now, will be focused on. That's what we're all focused on.
So-
We should be focused on that and the referendum.
Right.
And those are the issues.
So yes, no, or maybe.
As I said, I will be deciding after the election.
I know when I'm beaten. Thank you both.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.